It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we have a bit of a hodgepodge. We are going to look at some interviews from Robert Garcia with Lena Khan, Luke Thomas with Mighty Mouse. We're going to talk about some promoters that did some interviews. We're going to look at some pro wrestling stuff too. We've got a episode that is just chock full of content. But if you want access to all that content, it won't be like Wednesday's show, which was absolutely free. Make sure you go back and check that out. This one, part of it will be behind a paywall. So please get a paid subscription because it gives you access to all our content and it helps us keep the lights on around here. Now, John, how the heck are you?
I'm fairly good. I just turned off the game. So my hometown Minnesota Vikings are getting killed by my new team, the Chargers. So they, which are from, well, I still can't. The Chargers aren't an LA team. I can't even pretend they're an LA team. That's San Diego. I still feel guilty about that. But anyways, I'm doing all right. Watching some football, trying to unwind after a very, very busy day at work. So I'm sure we'll have nothing that will rile me up as we discuss the very peaceful sport of mixed martial arts and boxing. Sports, plural, I should say.
And you know, sports entertainment with WWE. And let's be real. MMA is also a bit of sports entertainment as well.
Yeah, I can already feel my blood pressure starting to rise as I even think about it.
You have had some weirdos replying to you on social media this week with the silliest arguments ever. Now, we're going to get into that later, but I gotta feel for you. I gotta have a little sympathy, share some headspace with you, and feel bad for you. You know.
I like I always say, I like two things. I like pity and accolades. Deserving or not of either, I like both. So
I feel you're deserving of pity and always deserving of accolades. Now.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. Even though it might not be true, I do appreciate that.
It is true, but it's coming from me, so there's a heavy bias there. So, all right. Now, we're going to go ahead and get right down to brass tacks. And Robert Garcia gave an interview to Ellie Seckbach where he talked about Dana White. He said, and I quote, "From what I am seeing and what I'm experiencing, he's going to be paying more money than normal promoters do. So these young fighters will want to be with him and fight with him. In the long run, he will be in control." What do you make of that?
Well, it's an interesting quote, and I watched the interview. That's the one where he's walking around the gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're in the gym, so I just want to make sure I was on the right interview that I watched because it's hard to tell his because he's in a gym, somewhat distracted at times. It's hard to tell his inflection. You know, is he being serious? Is he being comical? You know, that part's kind of lost being at the gym. But the way I interpreted that quote. And there's another part, a little line that we didn't talk about that's just as interesting. Him talking about how right now, no one's going to care about the Zuffa boxing belts, but 20 years down the line, they might be the belts that everybody wants, right? Things change based on, you know, your position in the sport. But the way I interpreted that line, that particular line about he's paying more money than normal promoters. Now, we all know the complaint is when people see these contracts, they kind of, laugh it off, the Zuffa boxing contract, because it's so low compared to like a Boots Ennis or Shakur or any of the other current champions or contenders. It's looked at, man, they are paying nothing. But what Garcia is talking about is they are paying more for the next tier of boxers. They're paying better. And I think his comment struck me more as a warning is that he's willing to pay more now, these young fighters, so they'll sign with him so they can get a whole roster filled up with these guys. But further down the line, he's going to be in control. right? The Zuffa Boxing title might be the title everybody wants, that the boxers are going to be signed with him. And so for right now, they're paying, as the way I interpret it, he was basically given the warning that we've stated on the show that they can pay above market rate, pay above what the others are paying for these boxers. But with the eventual goal is that later down the line, when the market increases and these boxers should be making more, they will be in position as a repeat player, the Zuffa Boxing, TKO Boxing, they'll be in a position where they do not have to pay more at that point. And so they will be in control. So I took it, and maybe I'm reading it wrong, because again, it was hard where it was location, it was hard to infer what his emotions were when he stated this, but I took it as something of a warning from him.
A report from Bad Left Hook came out stating that the APBC vehemently objects to this abomination of a bill. They were referring to the Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act. Who are the APBC, and are they attached or related in any way to the ABC, which is the Associated Boxing Commission?
The association, APBC, is the Association of Professional Boxing Commissions. They're not related to the ABC. They're a separate entity that kind of covers the same. They represent globally the international bodies. And I don't want to be mean or anything. They really mean nothing. They have no influence, no power. No one listens to them. Most people in boxing are unaware of them. So their comments, I think it might look good if you start assembling a list of people opposing the bill, just like you put it with the sanctioning organizations. But the sanctioning organizations are also kind of the last people you want on your side because they're the most despised group in boxing. But they really don't, it doesn't mean anything except for the fact you can attach it to a long list of people that oppose the bill. Now, the good news for people that oppose the bill is that there's been, people that have higher standing, better standing in the business, that have more weight coming out against the bill. And that means a lot more. So, I just don't see much importance behind this statement by them. But, I guess it's better to be that if you're opposed to the Ali Act, you'd prefer that they're against it instead of for it.
Luke Thomas was on Mighty Mouse's podcast, and a clip of him talking about how the UFC has become a right-wing sport went very, very viral. Why do you think it touched a nerve, and do you think he was accurate?
It's strange that it touched a nerve, because I will answer the second part first. How do you argue against it? He was very accurate, I thought. And I am going to compliment ourselves here. We should note, I'm not sure we're the first, but I do think we are the first people, the first podcast, the first people in MMA to specifically bring up how the UFC was intentionally trying to become a right-wing conservative organization.
Yep.
And we brought it up because I had spoken to some UFC executives that worked in the sales department, and how they've said that was their intent. We were now moving because we'd given up trying to get all these blue chip sponsors, and we realized after Dana White spoke at the Republican convention in 2016 that we could make a pitch where we're not the sport that kneels, we're a conservative sport, we're not woke, and we can draw in B, C tier sponsors much lower than the ones we want, but we can get more of them and they'll pay more. And we brought that up, and I want to give credit. There's a lot of other people, and specifically, I think Zach Arnold has done a great job, more than anybody else, probably chronicling the political nature of Dana White and the UFC. But we should take our victory lap, because I believe we were the first to note that, because we had that information. And lo and behold, it's only been reinforced over the years since then that's the direction they've intentionally gone. So it's strange to me to see people argue with Luke Thomas about this, and it seemed to touch a nerve, I think, because I think on one hand, you have a group of people that are, let's call them the Joe Rogan types, that view themselves as nonpartisan. And although technically they probably do lean one way, there's very few real independents in politics in the United States. Most people lean to one party or the other. They'll say they're an independent, and really they're voting, Republican all the time, or they're voting Democrat. So the Joe Rogan figures probably almost always voting Republican. And so they're offended by the idea that the sport they like, they love, that their thing is a conservative sport. And then there's the other group of people that somehow take offense to that, even though they relish in the fact that it's a conservative-leaning organization. And I think that's the reason. But it makes no sense because, I mean, it's not like Luke was saying something derogatory. He was just pointing out a fact that the UFC has allied themselves with a party, a movement, the conservative movement. I don't know, actually tell you the truth, MAGA is not a conservative movement, but a right-wing movement in MAGA, and via that, the Republican Party. And there's no way around it. They raise money for them. The fighters, they set up for the fighters to do appearances with politicians. They bring Donald Trump for campaign rallies, basically, at their events. It's they members of the UFC that used to work at the UFC, or four of them have gone into the Trump administration. The relationship is just very, very entrenched. So that's the part. It's harder for me to understand how people could get so worked up thinking this is false when the evidence is clear, especially when that's part of the reason they celebrate the UFC is because of that relationship. Not everybody, but the people that were pushing back, that at least I saw getting upset at Luke Thomas. But there's no way around it. It's true.
Absolutely. I would point out that Kareem Zidane, also does a good job of pointing that out as well on his blog.
Yes. And I kind of spaced on that, but Kareem does it from a different angle. And then, so that's why I forgot about that, because there's a little more overlap, I think, with what Zach and we do. So, but anyways, you're right. You are right to point that out, because that is correct.
Now, you said you really, really enjoyed this interview. What did you think was particularly good or noteworthy about it?
Well, there's a lot of good stuff in it. What's really interesting was their conversations of things like, a lot of it's, kind of old. But when they got into discussions of fighter pay and the UFC antitrust case and the Ali Act, you could tell, and this is what I really liked about it. One, this is the part I laughed. Luke Thomas started talking about the problem with sanctioning organizations, and I was beaming because I'm like, Luke, this sounds exactly like something I would say. It's like I felt like a victor, because it's a pitch I've been saying or an argument I've been making for a while, and here's Luke repeating it. And then I was doubly happy because at the end of this, after I was getting ready to tweet it, like, Luke has this amazing comment. He goes, "I got this from John Nash." And I go, not only did he repeat what I say in a very concise, it's Luke Thomas, not incredibly concise, but a very well organized argument, a point he made. He also credited me, and so that was it. Kind of made my day, because it's nice to know that the shit I've been talking and pitching for a long time has actually impacted people, and they picked it up and ran with it. And it's also, I was happy, I not that I expected any credit, but it was nice that Luke gave me credit on that. Not that that's important, but again, like I said before, I like accolades, so I'm not going to turn that down. But to get back to the point, the bigger part that I thought was interesting when they have these discussions was the different approach that Mighty Mouse had that you saw from past fighters in the past, that basically he acknowledged some of these problems. Now, he's still happy to be a UFC fighter, and I don't knock him. A lot of fighters are happy they fought in the UFC. They discussed that they realize the UFC is the 800-pound gorilla, run everything. But the idea that they understand the nature of the business better than it was just a few years ago, they understand the limitations. It was interesting to note that, and this is something I've seen a lot recently, and you could see kind of how the antitrust case has radicalized a lot of MMA fighters. He specifically brought up the MMAFA and Rob Macy, specifically complimented them. Now, that was a few years ago. Very few fighters would bring them up. Very few fighters in the media would mention them. And now in the last few weeks, you see him saying that, Matt Brown saying that, several fighters, just numerous fighters have mentioned them, basically said these are the only guys working for us, which is just a dramatic change from what it was just a few years ago. Now, I'm sure the vast majority of current fighters are probably unaware of them, because fighters are, as any fighter will tell you, during the beginning of their career up to a certain point, they have blinders on and they don't pay attention to any of this stuff, and then almost till it's too late. But it just shows that this is the winning, the fact that they got a settlement, the fact that the money hopefully is going to apparently Anjan has been very late in sending these checks out. So hopefully the checks go out. But the fact that money's now going to fighters, I think has now radicalized them, because they started paying attention to what was being said. They started paying attention to what happened and why they're getting that money. And that was probably the most fascinating part of this interview, because it touched on that. You could see a fighter taking this information in and repeating it in a way that just a few years ago fighters did not do.
Luke Thomas also interviewed Lena Khan, and they discussed the UFC's FTC investigations and TKO's efforts to amend the Ali Act. What did you make of Lena's views on all of this?
It was fairly interesting. Now, she didn't get too deep into it, but I think she politely basically pointed out that the FTC completely dropped the ball on the UFC earlier, and that the previous regime, the previous consumer welfare model they were using, which ignored damages to workers, which would include the athletes, the fighters, left open the route for the UFC to acquire Strikeforce and, basically monopolize the industry. I think there's no argument that they have market power monopoly. And you'd think that the documents that they had at the time, like their intent to buy out Pride just to, foreclose them from anybody else acquiring it, would have been enough. But, the odds are that when they did analysis at the time, they only looked at would it impact the consumers, us, the customers, and they didn't look at how would it affect the rest of the industry. And I think it's been terrible for the rest of the industry overall. I mean, I'm sure people will look at the wage level and say, oh, it has been terrible. Revenues have never been higher, and pay is up for all the fighters, but pays up on a wage level percentage. But again, we could always go back to Major League Baseball. From the 50s to the 70s, Major League Baseball players' salaries did nothing but go up, but their share of the revenue was about what the UFC is, about 17%. It shrunk, and was, by the mid 70s, before Curt Flood and all the Marvin Miller and all the stuff they did. And so, no one, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that baseball players were not getting screwed at that time, especially when you see what happened within a decade after the reserve clause was gotten rid of. And I think fighters now find themselves in that position. So it was interesting her talking about that. It was interesting her talking about the monopolization that they didn't bring this up specifically, but it basically goes hand in hand with what we talked about last episode, monopolistic leverage, where the UFC or any organizations use their market power in one industry to try to gain market power in another industry more likely related. And they talked about how that's exactly what's going on right now with UFC, and then TKO moving into boxing apparently is going to try to gain market power there. So all of it fascinating. I think the most interesting part is that Luke Thomas spoke to Lena Khan about the UFC and about the TKO's efforts to amend the Ali Act. And what makes that massive is because we've said for a while, there's just does not seem to be a lot of interest in this case outside in the circles that you would assume be interested in it. Not just, people in the fight business and combat sports, but people that have interest in labor law and antitrust law and concentration and corporate cronyism and all these other aspects that apply to what UFC and TKO and their other ventures are doing. We're not getting a lot of coverage of this. And now that Lena Khan has spoken about it and surprisingly informed about a lot of it, I'm kind of hoping, kind of expecting it might be picked up by people in those circles that were not paying attention, because, if Lena Khan's talking about it, it might be noteworthy. And so this might be big for those who would like to get more attention on the subject, so that there's potentially more pushback against TKO's efforts to amend the Ali Act. Again, their talking point is they do not change the Ali Act, but we all know that when you put out a carve-out that says we are exempt from all the provisions of the Ali Act, that basically means you're amending it. So it'll be interesting to see if any other sites, any other individuals pick up where Lena Khan from this interview and also take an interest and do a news story or an article or something about it.
Oscar De La Hoya was asked where he thinks Zuffa Boxing will be in 5 years. What did you think of his answer?
Oh God, sad. I mean, and this goes hand in hand with Eddie Hearn's answer about what Zuffa Boxing do, with what Eric Gomez, the matchmaker for Oscar De La Hoya, said. And it's that you have to wonder if they really believe that or they're just saying that. And I've talked to a lot of people in boxing.
Wait, you need to say what they think.
I'm going to get to that in 1 second. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. So I've talked to a lot of people in boxing, in the industry, people involved with some of the major promotions that are, we would say are targets of TKO, Zuffa Boxing. And they all dislike what they're doing. I think they're all concerned about what they're doing, but none of them seem concerned about the threat that we think they pose to them. And I talked to them, and it hits me, and I think Eddie Hearn, and I think Oscar De La Hoya and Gomez, I think the problem is they just can't imagine it. They can't imagine the problem. And what they think is that Zuffa Boxing is going to come in and change boxing by amending the Ali Act and maybe taking care of advantage of fighters, but they don't see the threat. They're like, well, they're going to go do their own UBO thing, which will be unfair to us because they'll be able to operate a certain way. But really, we'll be still over here doing what we always do. And so they can't imagine it going beyond that, but you just have to imagine, look at what happened to MMA to see how far it can go, how little imagination they're probably applying to this. Now, that doesn't mean Zuffa Boxing is going to take over boxing, is going to monopolize boxing. But you look at the current landscape where the boxing promoters in the United States, and let's target United States, which again is the biggest market, historically generates the most revenue by far. And Dana White even said, you have to do well in America to do well for boxing to be healthy. In America, no one has a good broadcast deal. Top Rank lost their broadcast deal. PBC is now down to a few shows, basically pay-per-views on Amazon. They don't have a place to regularly provide bouts, televised bouts for their boxers. They're now, working as a manager, Heyman, getting their fighters over to Saudi Arabia and Ring Magazine. DAZN is providing all the airtime for everybody else, but DAZN isn't paying a lot, and no one watches DAZN. They're off the air. So Paramount is now going to give Zuffa Boxing probably the best broadcast deal of any boxing promoter in North America. On top of that, you look at TKO, the flywheel, as they like to say, their flywheel, you have TKO Boxing and UFC on Paramount. They have a relationship with Paramount and CBS. Well, that potentially takes away all competitors, rivals from that branch. If they pick up Warner Brothers Discovery, well, there goes a whole nother group of potential networks, right? ESPN has a relationship with WWE. Are they gonna go all in on an MMA promotion or boxing if they want to keep happy with Ari Emanuel and his endeavor, or William Morris endeavor, I should say? Now they're back to that, and there are other parts of the flywheel. Who knows? So you look at it, they're putting their pieces on all the major platforms that can reach the American audience. The only other one is Netflix, but they have a relationship with WWE, and they're only doing a select few events per year with MVP and potentially others. So right there, they have the power to kind of block people from a lot of access to a lot of the major potential spots where they could reach audiences. And there's a big difference in audiences, a big difference in platforms. ESPN offers a much better platform than many of the others, right? Because it reaches sports audience. Netflix hits everyone, so that's a much better platform. Paramount, let's see what Paramount does, but if Paramount combined with William Morris Discovery, that's a massive platform. That's going to be another one. So it's going to be hard to compete on the platform level. So they're taking that out right now. So all the other boxing promoters got to be concerned about that. On top of that, they're potentially going to get this bill passed, the American Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act passed, which as they note, doesn't change a word of the Ollie Act. It just lets this UBO ignore completely the Ollie Act. That's all it does. And what that's going to do is, if you read the legislative history, and I think it's something that maybe current people in boxing just kind of ignore because they haven't lived through this in decades, they're going to be able to issue their own titles and ranks, issue engage in coercive contracts, all these advantages that the other promoters won't have. And kind of like a fly trap or a black hole, if they get some of the top boxers into their promotion, well, the sport, all these sports, out of principle, the sports are, built around both boxing and MMA are built around the very top. That those are the ones that generate the most interest, the most revenue. They get them in place. Well, it won't mean much because eventually those fighters can move on, but it does mean much if those fighters stick with TKO and the only one that can fight and beat them are people in the TKO family, in the Zuffa Boxing walled garden. And then they'll be in a situation that no matter what, they win, because if no one else can compete against the top fighter except someone signed to Zuffa, then they win because they have both the A and the B side. So whoever wins, they end up continuing to own the title. And in the long run, if after 5-10 years, if the Saudis put up all the money, I don't even have to be 10 years, let's say just 5 years. I mean, it didn't take long for the IBF to be a major title in the 80s when Holmes and Hagler and everybody dropped their belts and went to the IBF. But considering that situation, if all the top champions get signed by Saudi Arabia and Ring Magazine and are brought over to a kind of a Zuffa Boxing Ring Magazine world universe, well, if the people that beat them continue to stay in that universe, after 5 years, the fans are just going to start being adjust to the idea, used to it, that the number one boxer or whatever is the one holding this title. And the other promoters are going to be on the outside without a TV deal, without the backing of the Saudis, if the Saudis ever want to pull the plug on them. And all the top fighters now trapped in a UBO owned by Zuffa. So I think they have not seriously considered the possibility. And that's not to say that's going to happen. A lot of stuff could go wrong. Maybe TKO's just in the business of collecting their fees from the Saudis, and they have no interest in really, really, pushing it further than that. But based on the type of revenue they can make, I imagine they will make a push. And I just don't think the other promoters have really envisioned the potential possibility down the line, what will happen, because they have not, unlike MMA fans have witnessed the UFC do this to Pride, do this to Strikeforce, and do this to all these other promotions, just gobble them up. People in boxing have not witnessed this since the days of Don King, and that wasn't the worst of it. Before Don King was even worse with the IBC of New York, and so they are not as experienced with how easy it is to monopolize the sport without the certain protections in place.
He was also asked why no boxing promoters were on last week's CSAC call. What were your thoughts on what he said?
Well, he said he wasn't aware of it. He thought it wasn't going to be until December. That's partly true. I think some people just ignored it because they thought it was going to happen till later. But I do know some boxing people were contacted. Some boxing people said they were going to be on the call. But to be fair to some of them, things popped up and they couldn't actually be on the call. Certain events happened. But again, I think it goes to, I think they're underestimating what the potential possibility is here. I think they were partly caught off surprise that California State Athletic Commission moved it up on behalf of TKO, because I think they're just not, they can't imagine how much power TKO is. I'm sure they can imagine, they can talk about, discuss it, but they're just, it's almost inconceivable to them, because again, we talked about, the power TKO now has over the state athletic commissions, because all these other entities either have disappeared or they've monopolized industry. So all the streams of revenue that the athletic commissions depend on to stay afloat are almost exclusively controlled by TKO. So they're going to do whatever TKO says. And I think a lot of these people in boxing, again, just have not thought through this and are not quite aware of how much leverage TKO has at this moment compared to them, how much power they have, how they can get things done that they cannot. And so, I think they blew it off thinking nothing's going to happen till December, not aware that, nope, TKO can make things happen because they have They have everything in their corner. They have all the marbles, and the commissions are just reacting to that.
Now, I referenced this earlier in the intro that people have been really trying to wheel and deal some critical argument toward the Ali Act as it stands today. And this is all happening on social media. Can you sort of summarize some of these arguments that are driving you batty and why you think they're mistaken?
Well, I mean, some of them drive me more batty than others. Some people are pretty polite about it, and some people are freaking dicks about it. And if I don't mind, actually, I'm looking forward to someone having a quality criticism of the Ali Act, but I haven't gotten one yet. One of the smartest people on the internet, Dan Brown, he constantly brings up the fact that Ali Act doesn't apply to certain cases, or and that's true. It's Ali Act isn't perfect. It doesn't apply to everyone. Doesn't always work, but it exists and does protect. Sometimes it does work for boxers. It does. We've had Pat English on talking about how he's used the Ali Act for his boxers. We've had Kurt Emhoff talking about the exact same thing, that it has served a purpose for them. They've taken the right of private action. They have challenge ratings by the sanction organizations. There are parts of it that have been upheld by them and their boxers personally, and so it works. And so it's not perfect. It doesn't always work. It doesn't always apply. There's loopholes left and right, but is the answer to those loopholes to get rid of it because it doesn't always work? I just don't think that's the answer. I think the argument would then be to strengthen it. Now, there's another group of people, and I got to admit, some of them are incredibly rude, that want to get rid of the Ali Act because they say it doesn't work and it seems to be centered around the fact that PBC, according to them, got away with Ali Act violations. And because of that, the Ali Act's useless and we should just get rid of it, which is... I don't quite understand this argument at all, except for the fact that you hate PBC. And I'm not going to say that PBC didn't violate the Ali Act, or specifically Al Heyman hasn't violated the Ali Act. There was allegations against him by Top Rank and Golden Boy. Now, the part that the critics of PBC and the Ali Act kind of miss is that those cases, the Top Rank case was settled in court. We don't know the full details, although what it did lead to is that PBC could no longer have exclusivity on their time buys on the networks, and that opened the door for Top Rank to get on ESPN. So in many ways, we talked about previously, that led to the demise of American broadcast boxing as we know it because of that. But the Golden Boy lawsuit was thrown out by a judge because Golden Boy did not have standing to bring a case to court under the Ali Act, because the Ali Act is only there to protect boxers. And so they're mad about this. Some of these people, they're mad that PBC got away, according to them. Al Heyman got away with violating the Ali Act. But the reason he got away with it is because no boxer wanted to charge him with an Ali Act violation. And so was he violating the Ali Act? Well, none of his boxers were upset, right? So I don't know. I mean, at least even if he was, they weren't upset about it. So I do not see the logic of saying, because none of his boxers were upset with him to charge him with an Ali Act violation, we should remove the right of private action to all boxers so they can't sue any promoter or manager that they think is violating the Ali Act. That, too, doesn't make any sense to me. You would think the argument would be like, man, if you think Al Heyman was violating the Ali Act, the argument should be, we really need to strengthen the portions that get federal investigations going, to get federal prosecution, to get the government involved. That maybe we have to pass the Professional Boxing Amendment Act so that the National Federal Boxing Commission that it would create would enforce the Ali Act, something like that. You'd think that would be the argument, but instead it's like, this is terrible. The Ali Act didn't do anything to stop Al Heyman. We should let Dana White and TKO get rid of the Ali Act and monopolize boxing because we were so upset at PBC for what we claim was their attempt to monopolize boxing. And I think there actually is some, I won't say monopolize, but gaining much bigger market share. I think that was PBC's intent. But the other point is that if you think PBC was trying to monopolize boxing, Well, one thing that saved boxing was that PBC was denied the chance to print up their own belts. If you think that was their goal, then they were denied the chance to print up their belts because Tim Luckenoff sent a letter to the Attorney General pointing out that that would be a violation of the Ali Act. And which is, lo and behold, why Zuffa Boxing is trying to get Congress to amend the Ali Act. So that whole argument, I don't understand as well, the whole PBC thing, because in some ways, the thing that saved boxing from the dreaded PBC takeover that obviously you did not want to see, these people did not want to see, was that the Ali Act was in place, even though it failed to assist not Heyman, but Arum and Oscar as much as they'd hoped. It prevented, if you think Al Heyman was intent on creating his own titles and monopolizing boxing, it did prevent him from doing that, if that's your theory. So I don't get that argument at all, because why get rid of it why get rid of the boxers from having their own right of private action just because promoters weren't able to use that? Again, I don't get that logic. And then the final one is, I'm not going to name names. I don't want to mock the person. He was somewhat polite on X, but some people brought up arguments that caused me to pull out my hair, because they're not even Ali Act violations. It has nothing to do with the Ali Act. They're cases that they use as examples that that do not cite the Ali Act. They're interpretations of the Ali Act provisions that do not apply. And so just a lot of that. So I am waiting for a critic, a polite critic, hopefully on Twitter, to come up with some more reasonable arguments. And the best I've heard so far, even though I don't agree with them at all, is Andy Foster at least made some arguments. Even the stuff he didn't say, because I think it's a whole part about keeping the athletic commissions going, which to me is an argument. So I'm waiting for someone on social media at least to present a quality argument, and I have yet to see it.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!